Okay, Doug, I just want to say hi, and if you want to put up the screen-to-screen selling PowerPoint, it'll tell people where we are. We're going to improve profits, boost margins, productivity, and customize conversations. And of course, I'd like you to kind of introduce your own self on the next slide. And then, of course, as we know, this is a very interactive program, and we would like to have people write in the chat room and ask as many questions as they want. So with that, Doug, I'm going to have you take it away, and I appreciate you coming in today.
Yeah, great. So welcome everybody to the webinar here. We're going to go fast. What I encourage you to do is on wherever it's located on your screen, there's going to be a chat window to ask questions. What we're going to be able to do is be really flexible in terms of how we change directions. You know, maybe you want to learn more about tools, maybe you want to learn more about process, maybe you want to learn more about why. And so then that way what we can do is specifically tailor the webinar to your specific needs rather than assume what you need to know in the order you need to know it. And so really, you kind of, as we start to take a look at, why screen-to-screen selling, why would we want to work with a client, not being physically present, because we might be at a disadvantage. If I were to meet you at your office, it's a whole lot harder to get rid of me. If I'm working with you over the phone, trying to influence a sale or influence you to move forward on a contract, it's easy to click the end button, for the online meeting software. So, really, if you take a look at, why would you want to meet somebody screen to screen, we can kind of start there and then start to move the way forward. So typically, transactions are done face to face. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do something a little bit different here that maybe you haven't seen before. Jane, you can see my screen, correct?
I can.
Great.
Yes,
so what do you see right now?
I see a blue smiley face.
Yeah. So if in real estate sales, typically what ends up happening is if you start the day in the north side of town, let's pretend that's where your home is or that's where your office is. Then you have your next appointment that's here on the southwest of town, and then you have to drive to meet another client on the east side of town, and then you have to go over the west and then back down south, and then you end up back up here. Well, what happens, typically is we spend more time in our car driving than we do actually having productive conversations. So, we say as far as what is the cost, it's not just the transportation cost of, gas mileage and so forth, but it's also our time being able to commute. If I were going to ask you the question, how much time do you spend in your car per day, per week, per month, per year, it starts to significantly add up. And there's also going to be situations where potentially you're working with an out-of-town buyer or an out-of-town seller, maybe it's even an international buyer, and you don't have the luxury of having a conversation with them face-to-face all the time. So what we need to do is really be practical in terms of which technology can we use to facilitate that conversation and really differentiate ourselves as far as the typical sales process. Really when you look at a typical sales presentation, I'm going to pull up another way of looking at it here. What I'm doing is I'm working from a little digital whiteboard, and I'll actually show you what that specifically looks like. But for a typical sales presentation, or even for training and development, teaching from a PowerPoint presentation, typically you have which are a bunch of slides that assume that the customer needs to know what you know in the order they need to know it. Well, really, what the customers have are questions specific to them, and so they probably don't need every single one of the slides that you're going to talk about. Maybe they only need a few of them. So really, if we start to look at, what are the top three things that might appeal to a seller, they might say, well, gosh, we need to sell our home quickly. So the time frame is really important. Or maybe they say, we're trying to get the most amount of money for our property, and we, our net, we need to at least be able to break even. Or maybe they say, the last time we tried to sell our property was a horrible experience. We were looking for ways to be able to simplify it. So if there's specific slides that you would pull up inside the presentation, you're not gonna share 60 slides in 60 minutes. You're gonna share what's specifically relevant to them. Another way of looking at it here, I'm gonna pull up a slide deck. This is something that you can grab online. It's a for screen-to-screen selling from the start to the finish. There's 122 slides that are here in the slide deck, and I could very easily start to go through and read for you bullet point by bullet point by bullet point. And at the end of it, you're probably gonna say, well, gosh, I could have read that on my own. So instead of giving you, I give you this as a resource to take a look at afterwards. But what we're going to do is get into the dynamic, kind of how to. So really kind of change the way you think about approaching buyers and sellers, so you don't always have to hop in a car. Is face-to-face better than screen-to-screen? Absolutely. But what happens when it's not realistic? There could be an example if you're, let's say, a client wants to meet with you and it's a competitive offer situation. You have another appointment with another client, and that you have to drive over with on the other side of town, and you say, sorry, I can't be there. Let's reschedule for tomorrow. In a competitive offer situation, you might lose. So what tools can you use with your specific customers to initiate, let's say, a screen share conversation, or maybe you're looking them, eye to eye through a webcam, so you can really understand their needs and really be very specific as far as your recommendations, rather than wasting a whole lot of time in the process. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back over here to the chat to kind of see what questions you might have, regarding what we're talking about, and from there it kind of gives me a good idea as far as where we're headed. So right now I don't see any questions being asked in the chat, or maybe any comments. Maybe say, slow down, Doug, you're going too fast. This is designed to be more of a conversation rather than a presentation. I don't want to talk at you. I want to have this conversation, with you here as we go through. So if there's something that kind of sticks out to you, go ahead and say, Doug, I've got a specific question. Can you help me with this?
Hey, Doug, there's a question that we got from someone. They texted us. What are some examples of how real estate professionals can use this screen-to-screen selling?
Yeah, so and I put up my Twitter handle. It's at Doug Devitre. If you want to send me throughout the program, you want to have direct access to me afterwards. Just send a quick tweet. I'll also give you the hashtag that I've been using for this conversation for Twitter. Screen to screen. That way you can kind of get access to a little bit more than just what we have for this specific program. So great question, Jane. What are some examples of how real estate agents can use screen-to-screen selling? Well, let's say that you're working with a seller and they've already moved out of town, and the seller wants to get updated regularly with their what's the market like right now? How many showings are we get? Can you show me the specific reports? Many times what happens is a real estate agent might email off report and say, here are the statistics, but really what the customers are paying for is our opinions of what some of these statistics might mean. So if we're kind of getting in a mode where we start to, for customer service, report back, we can have these conversations that are a little bit more dynamic and differentiated than just, working over the phone. In some situations where you have, multiple buyers that are in multiple locations, let's say it's a husband and wife that maybe travel, quite a bit significantly, and you need to be able to get them in the same room at the same time, which can also be a challenge when trying to schedule busy calendars. We can now meet through the computer, where I can see you, you can see me, you can see if I'm smiling, you can see if I'm maybe looking around or multitasking. This technology really allows us to replace the face-to-face type of meeting, but really kind of so where you're more productive. And what I'm finding now is customers are actually preferring to meet screen-to-screen rather than hop in a car to go to go see somebody. So it's interesting to see. It might not always work for every single situation, but as buyers and sellers become more familiar with some of the latest technology, it then becomes almost not a demand, but an expectation that a real estate agent not just has the tools, but also has the skills to be able to use this effectively. Did I answer that okay for you, Jane?
Actually, so thank you. I was going to ask you about when you talked about the customers prefer this. how do you know whether to use screen to screen versus face to face? What type, how do you approach that with your customers?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, as far as when to use screen to screen, or maybe when not to use screen to screen, I would probably kind of go through a little checklist inside my head, or maybe it's you do it really quickly to determine if this is a good fit or not. If when you start to ask specific questions, and the customer, maybe we're going to send them an email and they're not comfortable with email. Well, the chances are they're probably not going to be able to download an app or be able to participate in a conversation. So this really appeals to those customers that are a little bit more tech savvy than your traditional customer. Also, a challenge that we run into is not all customers have the same technology. So for example, you're probably familiar with the tool Skype, right? Well, what happens is if you have Skype, but the customer doesn't have Skype, you're not going to tell them to, create an account and a username and a password in order just to have a conversation. So what we need to do is look to see what are some of the usable technologies that are out there that doesn't necessarily, work with one specific advice. This last week, I was having a conversation with my auto mechanic, and rather than, because I'm out of town, he's trying to tell me what's going on, and I can't really conceptualize or visualize it. It would have been a whole lot easier if he would have been able to pull up his phone and kind of show me what's going on, rather than just telling me, telling me over the phone. And so what we need to be cognizant of, I'm going to put this up so you can kind of have a reference as far as when to use it, when not to, or really how to improve the customer experience with this. Let's pretend that you get a lead. Let's say somebody's really interested as far as maybe they found you through a website, or maybe they got you as a referral from one of your past clients. Then by the questions you use to determine which technology is going to work and which isn't, you can really actually use technology to harm your situation. If you get in a situation where you start to do slide narration, I share my screen with you now, and now I'm narrating slides, you're going to get really bored because I'm focused on what I'm going to say rather than what the customer's needs are. Or maybe if I tell you to download a specific software and it takes a really long time. Or maybe even you get to the far end and I tell you to download a software and your computer has to do a bunch of updates and 20 minutes have gone by and we haven't even been able to focus on what the true why we're doing this in the first place. So once we start to become familiar with some of the technology and we start to use really good tools, then customers start to get interested or a little bit more curious, because why? Most agents are still working, over the phone. And then when you start to use your ears and your mouth in equal proportions, and maybe you can even see the customer in some cases, because they've also activated their webcam, you start to develop a relationship at a much faster level than you would, over the phone. Even just last week, I was working with a specific client, and she said to me, or it wasn't a client, it was a potential prospect, and she says to me, I feel like I've known you forever. Well, gosh, that's really hard to replicate over the phone with using the webcam and so forth. We were able to really kind of build a relationship at a faster level. And once you start talking about them, and then you start to really get very specific as far as your recommendations, not just pulling up a CMA, but maybe you co-browse where you're looking on the internet searches together, or maybe you're looking at the Zillow page what the property might be specifically worth, and then you actually demonstrate why Zillow is overpriced, not just say it, but you actually demonstrate by writing on the customer's computer screen. That's one way to kind of get them excited, because guess what? Very few people are doing this already. And then you get to the point where, have you ever been a part of a phone conversation in the past where maybe an hour, you spent 45 minutes to an hour, and then you can't really remember what was said over the last 45 minutes? So there's an idea or a concept, and it's in the book. I just want to kind of show you what this looks like. It's called the visual summary. And so I'm going to take a screenshot of what it looks like on my computer screen as far as this digital whiteboard, so you kind of have an idea of kind of what we're talking about right here. So this is the whiteboard. Sorry?
I'm sorry, when you have a moment, we'll have a number of questions too, but finish what you're doing, please.
Yeah, great. So what I've been doing is I've been using this little whiteboard because, you know, like we're having a conversation here, I'm drawing up annotations or inserting slides when necessary. These aren't pre-ordered. This just based off of what I feel is most appropriate at the time. So rather than sending 60 slides in order, do you see where it says up here at the top? I'm actually going to draw an arrow to it. It says, you know, of 6. What that represents is all of the different images and all the annotations that are a part of this conversation. So at the end of it, you know, what you can now do is send a PDF of everything that you've talked about, and that it highlights, you know, maybe even the financials that are part of the conversation. Maybe, you know, it's, you know, in real estate, we're really education-based salespersons. We're educating the customers, you know, throughout the process. I can now send you the 6 of 6 slides that are customized to you in real time as this one PDF. So then, you know, as far as who else is doing this in the marketplace right now, you know, no one, very few people, maybe if you've read the book. So what I recommend doing here is real quick, and then Jane, I'll take the question is, you know, if it kind of got your interest a little bit, you know, you can go to Amazon and get the book. It's available everywhere, you know, Barnes & Noble, CEO Read. You know, get started. The Kindle version is great, but if you like to mark up and dog ear the different pages, you obviously have that as a resource. So Jane, I'm sure we've kind of gathered some interest because we're talking about some new things and a new way of communicating. What are some questions that have kind of come from the group that we can start hammering away at?
Okay, I'll give you a couple of them. One is, does this technique translate well for commercial sales? Where can I access this slide, which I think you answered a little bit. Where can I find a slide deck software?
Yeah, okay, great. So, so the first question is, does this work very well for commercial sales? And absolutely, you know, with, you know, I've never sold commercial real estate before, but I'm going to tell you right now, as far as the application, how this crosses over, you've got multiple decision makers in multiple areas, you know, sometimes, right? You also have a lengthy amount of reports that, you know, let's say if it's the, I'm trying to remember what the reports where you do your due diligence and or maybe it's the letter of intent and you start to negotiate in a contract, you know, rather than sending over the PDF and say scroll down to paragraph number 10, line item 267, I can actually pull the contract up in real time and we can actually go through, and maybe if I need to, I can highlight it. You know, if we're talking about, let's say, a residential complex, not a residential complex, apartment complex, right? And you're starting to calculate the financial rate of return for the apartment building. Well, once you start to change in different variables, it depends on what you use. You know, you might use an Excel spreadsheet to do this. You might have an app or something, you know, on your phone that allows you to calculate this. Once we're able to do this in real time with the customer, it then shows us that we're really focused on them, and it's done in real time. So what we're doing is we're avoiding a lot of rework and explaining items over and over again that we typically, you know, could save by doing it together. I hope that was helpful. Jane, one more question, and then I'm going to show you one more thing.
Kind of a different two questions that will probably have similar answers. Where can we access this slide, which is one of the slides you had up, and where can I find slide deck software, which is probably giving examples of apps or tools you would recommend?
Yeah, great. So I'll give you a couple, and these are all in the book, by the way. So if you do get the book, you'll get all of these visuals, and then also the haiku deck. I'll go ahead and write that out for you. One way of producing presentation slides that are a little bit more eye-captivating than your traditional ones is at haikudeck.com. So that the 122 slides you had just seen over here, that's an example of, you know, presentation slides that you can have. Also, another one where you can put it where they're online is at slideshare.net. This is like the YouTube of PowerPoint presentations. It became so popular, you know, that LinkedIn bought them. So SlideShare is an example of, another type of presentation software, which, if you use PowerPoint, you can just upload the existing PowerPoint presentation to slideshare.net. It's good for search engine optimization. It's good for lead generation. It's good for education-based marketing before, during, and after the sale. The tool that I'm using right now is my digital whiteboard. It's called Doceri. It's a free app available for the iPad. Now, if you use Android, there's an app called a Whiteboard. Doceri is kind of my secret weapon, whether I'm working face-to-face with a customer or I'm working screen-to-screen. As you start to look at different web platforms, right? You've got Skype, you've got GoToMeeting, you've got WebEx. We're using, I think, Instant Meeting for this specific webinar. What happens is you have different whiteboard technologies that have different features, and they're located in all these different places. And what happens is the more these tools you start to add onto your arsenal, the higher the learning curve. So what I use Doceri for is kind of a couple different things. It's like my John Madden Telestrator, where then it allows me to frame, it allows me to start to draw on my existing slides, or it allows me to pull up the whiteboard like you've seen me do here. So it's the Telestrator and it's the whiteboard. That then, if we're talking about using the conversations, 1, 2, 3 with the customer, we start to find new ways of being able to frame some specific examples. Now what I can do is, I'll show you what this looks like here, is I'm going to take a screenshot of what you saw before. And now this becomes content marketing. So see up here at the top, if I click on this little image here, if I click on this little share button, I can now, all my annotations are now, I can save it as an image that now I can put up on social media. I can put up on Facebook as a quick comment. I can put it up, on Instagram. It's a quick way of being able to reuse and repurpose content from conversations you've had with past clients, just as long as you omit some of the personal details that, would potentially breach confidentiality. So, anything you share, you want to make sure that it's kind of universal process rather than, specific examples from inputs from the client.
All right, that's great. And I have another question, which are there common mistakes that real estate professionals maybe make using this type of technology, and maybe how do they get comfortable with this?
Yeah, boy, there's a lot of mistakes you can make because there's a lot of different technologies that are part of the process. There's 2 slides that I encourage you to look at that are inside of that slide deck. One are the barriers, and then another one is the irritants, right? So I'll give you examples of each, right? So the barriers. What are some barriers? If the customer does not have a fast enough internet connection, you do not have a fast enough internet connection, it's not going to be able to happen. So what we need to do is understand, maybe that's one of your questions ahead of time is, do you have a fast enough internet connection that we can do this? And really, if through this, as we kind of look as a process, in a relationship building process. Maybe it starts off where we meet somebody face to face, and then we talk over the phone, and then we built up enough trust to the fact to where, now we can kind of do a webinar type of conversation like we're doing right now. A mistake that you can make is by trying to force a customer into an environment that might not necessarily be comfortable with, or maybe you use a tool inappropriately that you didn't know that causes the customer to think of you as a weirdo. For example, did you know now using some of the meeting software, what you can do is if you let me go back here to the. Did you know that if you in a conversation inside of some of the meeting software, it can actually activate the participant webcam? So if they're not ready and they're not dressed, or they don't feel comfortable, seeing face to face, and you've activated their webcam, you could put them in a very embarrassing position that you didn't mean to or intend to, but just happened through the software. Some other mistakes you can make is by not closing down other windows before you start a new conversation. Another mistake you can make is by not having the, if you know you're going to have a conversation at 1 o'clock, not having the websites and not having the visuals prepared ahead of time so that you're fumbling around, looking for things and you think and say, well, oh, gosh, I can't find it. Where is it? That's another mistake that you can make that kind of hinders the experience. Through not just the tool selection, but also the skill set development, the faster we get at being able to retrieve what the customer wants and being able to ask the right questions throughout the process, the quicker we can move them to a decision. And for the cost of what we're talking about, it's pennies on the dollar for what you would put on your gas tank.
That's great, Doug. One thing for some people that maybe have never even heard of this before, how would they get started? What's your suggestion? And then we have to wrap it up.
Yeah, great. So how would you get started? The easiest solution is buy the book. And I don't mean to say that to be self-serving, but really as you start to look at picking apart the sales process and really understanding the beliefs, many times it's the beliefs that need to be changed before the behaviors that can start to take place. So if you say to yourself that screen to screen it won't work for me, or my customers don't use that, then you're putting yourself inside of a box, right? So as you start to look through, maybe you're already doing some of this. Maybe you're starting to use FaceTime, or maybe you're already using Skype, but you want to improve it. The good thing about the way the book was created, and it was intentionally, is done in a checklist format. So you can quickly go to specific areas that you need to improve on. Whether it's, I'll put up one last kind of slide so you can see, because then it starts to allow you to get very specific inside of this process here. So this is kind of the process in the beginning. Maybe you need help in just the preparation of being able to find prospects better. Maybe it's tool selection, or maybe it's having better conversations, or maybe it's scheduling, or maybe it's creating better visuals. Maybe it's using the webcams. Maybe it's doing screen share. Maybe it's using participant chat. We could go through every single one of these, but really what part of this being an interactive conversation is I say, what's your priority, and let's talk about that. So then we're not focused in on, things that might necessarily be relevant. So the book is kind of created in checklist format, which allows you to do that pretty easily. What I guess maybe to wrap it up, it's easy to be able to access, a lot of stuff what I put out there. I do a video podcast with a lot of influential thought leaders. That's available on iTunes. You can get it right on your phone. You can get it on the go. All the visuals that I have are mobile friendly. Just kind of have to practice what you preach, right? Many times you can't see slides on a phone because they're so small. You kind of have to read it. So you can actually access them and read them on your mobile device. So there's plenty of resources out there. The question is will there be enough urgency either now or then, when it comes time, a customer demands it, for you to start to take action? And I hope that's today.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Doug. And it was great learning more about screen-to-screen selling. And thank you, everyone else, for joining the chat room and the webinar.
Thank you, Jane. Thanks for hosting it.